This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester and the world. John Bailey with the Yankee for All Seasons, Peter Katz, and the Dean of Journalism in White Plains, Jim Benerofe. And this is White Plains Week. And now, Jim, the headlines.
And now the headlines for the week of July 13th, 2018. It is the height of the summer, with Westchester experience a week of the 90s and up. County Executive George Latimer briefs Westchester on the 2018 budget deficit. It's larger than anyone expected. Another truck wanders on the Hutchinson River Parkway and ties up traffic for hours across the region. The county executive wants to stop these incursions once and for all. Governor Cuomo asks legislature for a Roe v. Wade abortion rights law in New York State. White Plains Common Council approves expanded transit district zoning for White Plains Mall rebuild and introduces new site plan. White Plains Hospital office building project is approved. Westchester single home retail sales soft in second quarter, but median sale price goes up. Westchester luxury home sales up slightly after being down 20% in first quarter. Good Counsel property hearing will remain open and be taken up again August 5th amidst great opposition. Trump abroad, the president tour of NATO and England ruffles feathers, and Putin next stop on the road trip. David Buchwald declares for re-election in the 93rd Assembly District.
Thank you, Jim. And now we go to the White Plains Week Video Newsreel. And this, of course, is the beach out at Sherwood Island in Connecticut. It was a lovely day, Wednesday, and just a good day to be there because it was 94 degrees in Westchester, but it was quite less out there, and the water was great, and it was high tide. Summer in Westchester County, and it's just a great beach.
Well, Sherwood Island is in Westchester County, but nonetheless.
All
right, so you're
Coast Beach.
You're a turncoat, John. You left the state to go to the beach when we have all these wonderful beaches right here. You could have gone to Playland.
Did the immigration authorities get you?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, well, it does cost an out-of-stater $15 to attend that beach, but it is a very nice facility. Did you know it was the first state park in Connecticut?
No, I didn't know that.
It is, and it was a very nice beach. Now, the big story of the week was money and the lack of it, because County Executive George Latimer held a briefing for the media on Monday, and in that, the auditors of the county it talked about how big the deficit actually is. In fact, Nick DeSantis explained the budget and how we might be able to fix it.
Of about $5 million, bringing the total amount of what we call one-time shots at about $31.2 million going into the 19 budget, and if there were a labor settlement of just 1%, the impact would be about $16.5 million on base, bringing a total gap of about $47 million. So if we refer back to what I previously mentioned, we had about available to us about $15.5 million of undesignated fund balance. So what we have left in the Treasury is insufficient to meet the challenges of the gap that we just identified by using previous fund balance, by identifying increase in possible debt cost, and a reasonable estimation for a cost of a settlement impacting the 2018 budget. One of the things that we have discussed with the legislature when we analyzed the budget in November, we spoke about, obviously, the $32 million or thereabouts in property tax capacity without breaking the cap. I'm not that boring, am I? and perhaps another 0.5% increase on the sales tax. Sales tax, if it was enacted for a full year, it would probably yield about $70 million.
And next, I asked George Latimer about the increased sales tax receipts that we've seen so far these first 6 months of 2018, and whether or not the sales tax would be helpful or perhaps put in escrow.
If we reach the end of 2018 and our sales tax projections are well exceeded by any certain amount of money, that's very good news for 2018. The biggest concern I have, John, is that the heaviest single time of sales tax comes at the end of the year, the holiday shopping season. So you might pace ahead in the first 11 months of the year, and then depending on how well you do in what we call the Christmas shopping season, may determine whether you do or don't hit those numbers. You could, in theory, do very, very well, or you might slide back, so it depends. So we're encouraged by the numbers so far, but we don't know for sure that they'll hold up. I don't know if it's the second biggest time, but one of the next biggest times of sales tax revenue is the back-to-school shopping period, and that is also yet to come in late August or early September. And so since we don't have the benefit of those numbers yet, I don't want to do a straight line projection. I'll give you the classic example. After 14 games this year, the Mets were 12-2. They were pretty darn good. As a Met fan, right now, it's all I can do to not go to the 10th floor and jump off. So the reality of it is we'll wait and see a little longer in the season. We'll see how the Mets are doing. And we'll wait a little longer in the season. We'll see how sales tax is doing.
Will you be holding the excess sales tax that we're collecting in escrow as a hedge?
It depends. It depends on how this year ends up in terms of expenses. And as I mentioned to you on the revenue side, there are unknowables at this point. There are also unknowables on the expense side of circumstances. If we close the CSEA contract, when we do, there may be some movement in the workforce. Folks who have been waiting for the contract to close may then make some decisions on their own, and we may have a different landscape in terms of jobs and availability. We don't know that, and until we know it, we don't want to make estimates off of that. So, but the expense side of the budget might be lesser than we have projected. So it's hard to say. I know we're all looking for specificity. Believe you me, we would love to know these things. If I could look through the crystal ball and know exactly where we're going to be on December 15th, I'd have a lot greater confidence in being able to tell you how much sales tax will be. There's another factor in sales tax which I think we're looking at. It's unhappy for us as individuals, and that's the rising cost of gasoline. I'm told that sales tax on gasoline products represents about 15% of our total revenue stream on sales tax. And were that number to continue to rise, and we don't know, it's the summer driving season, that might generate additional revenue above what was projected. So we don't know. We're going to monitor it, and we'll see where we stand. Our intent is to solve problems and close problems, and to do it in a certain way. And that way is open, and that way is friendly, and that way is cooperative. And we'll listen to ideas. Not to point out to her because she happens to be in the room, but Margaret had an idea for how we help our disabled veterans. It was a good idea. We embraced it. We didn't worry about party affiliation. We embraced a good idea, and we passed it. So that's really the mission here. The mission is to solve problems, to do our job, to make this county effective again, to do it without having to jack property taxes up, but by God to do it. To go away from pure ideology and get to pragmatism and solve problems. And as I've said many times, I ain't kidding. I'm not a kid. I'm turning 65 in a couple of months. I'm not here to show off. I'm not here to worry about what's gonna happen in the next future. I'm here to solve these problems right now with these group of people. Let's do them, let's solve them, and let's move on.
And we are moving on. But the important thing that came out of that news conference was that the auditors had told the county legislature in November that they could make up the deficit they face with a 5.7% property tax increase and a 0.5% increase in the county sales tax rate, which sort of sets up the field here. He has to either do a lot of cost cutting or look at that.
Well, the auditors need to learn something about political reality. A 5% tax increase is not going to go over very well.
Certainly not. So how do we propose? But I think a 0.5% sales tax would help out considerably.
Sales tax, you know, you pass that around, spreads it around nicely. You also get people who don't live in the county spending money here, and so sales tax increases are always popular among politicians. What's not popular is actually cutting expenses, cutting people from the payroll.
Yeah, in fact,
but the other thing you can do is be very moderate in your contract negotiations,
Right.
in your handling of budgeted items, in your spending for replacement things like trucks and cars and police cars. You know, you run them for an extra year or two if you have to avoid making the expenditure.
And
There's a lot of things you can do. And the other thing to look at is what can we do to increase revenue from the Westchester County Airport, for example, to increase revenue.
Yes, perhaps we should do something
From
with
the
that
Westchester
airport.
County Center, for example, to increase revenue at Playland, for example. So, look, there are a lot of things right now on the Latimer administration's plate, and there are a lot of ways to go. So, so focusing on only solving the financial issues through a property tax increase or a sales tax
Well, they
increase
can
really
do that.
is very
They
very
can do
narrow-minded.
that. They can do that because we have a $32 million credit, which we can devote to increasing sales tax because we've been under the cap for a couple of years.
You know, John, we could also grab you by the ankles, turn you upside down, and shake you until all the money falls out of your pocket.
Well, that's going to happen in the next spring when that new tax rates go into effect. But generally, Jim, do you have any comments on this little?
Yeah, I think that
How big is this?
we're
This
e-
is really an amazing.
we're either going to end up raising taxes or we're going to have to decide things that really don't have to be done.
And that will cause a great deal of hue and cry.
Well, whatever you do is going to
lack of
cause you
funding.
and cry. There's
Anything
no.
else go on this week, or are we just in an unlucky Friday 13th where it's got to be taxes on our minds?
Well, Mr. Latimer on the radio on WVOX Tuesday morning basically said he doesn't want to raise property taxes. He wants to cut expenses.
Well,
Well, that's going to be hard to do.
This afternoon, they're going to take a look at the Hutchinson River Parkway and the business where it seems as if a spate of trucks these days seems to be focused. This parkway seems to attract tractor-trailer trucks like magnets.
Well, they blame it on the
trucks hit,
GPSs.
can hit bridges.
Yeah.
And so at 3 o'clock this afternoon, he's
On
due
Friday.
to meet at his office with representatives of the New York State Department of Transportation, the State Trucking Association, some local politicians to try to figure out what can we do to stop these tractor trailers from making wrong turns onto the Hutchinson River Parkway.
Can't they just put up radar units on?
Well, there are some radars which detect oversized vehicles. And also, John has been saying, why not look at the simplest solution is to put a height bar
right
across
over
the
every
entrance.
Right.
Just as if you go into most parking garages, you'll see a height bar at the entrance, so that if your vehicle is taller than the entrance to the garage, you'll hit the height bar.
And it could be called the Latimer line.
Yeah, something like
this
that.
big,
yeah.
nice.
So that's one way of doing it. The
But that's
signage
serious.
doesn't work. They've painted big letters on the pavement saying no trucks, low bridges. That doesn't seem to work.
No, it's very
where
cryptic.
there are the radar units. For some reason that doesn't seem to be much of a deterrent. And one of the major problems is that GPS units, most GPS
Don't
units,
distinguish
do
between
not distinguish between
truck,
limited
prohibited
access highways and those which allow commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
So,
Now, in other stuff in the city, at the Common Council meeting on July the 2nd, Jim, when you were out of town, we got some new news about the White Plains Mall. If you recall, this is what the old White Plains Mall proposal was, and they came up with another design on July the 2nd, and that's what it looks like. It's a much
well,
bigger.
it's denser, it's
Yeah.
taller. There's just more stuff there, and they're making denser use out of the property.
Yeah.
And frankly, in my opinion, I think this will be welcomed with open arms
Yes,
by the
that's
administration
another.
in White Plains.
That's what's. And yes, I would say it's a done deal, wouldn't you? I would say they got to do something with that because it's going to be about a year before they get it rolling anyway, and they get it financed. Now, there is a White Plains Hospital that got approval for their new office building right there. And one thing about that area, you got to really watch that Longview Avenue where the Dick Steen Center is, because that is creating quite a traffic backup now.
Well, it's become a very active area. There is a garage, which the city built, which is seeing increased use. You've got the assisted living facility, the Kensington, right there on the corner at that intersection. So it's becoming a little pocket of activity when the White Plains Hospital's medical office building is up and running. It will become an even greater area of activity, attracting a lot of patients who will then drive to the area, and of course we'll have to park. So.
Right. Now, Westchester Real Estate was in the news this week, and they had if you can see that slide, there we are. And what you're seeing there is single-family houses down 5%, single-family house sales down in the second quarter, condominiums down 7.2%, co-ops down 10.6%, 2 to 4 families up 6.1%, and the median sale price is up 6.1% to $710,800. But
of course,
the market
median
is soft.
median sale price is very different from average sale price. What median going up tells you is that the more expensive houses are the ones that are closing.
Right, and single-family homes, the mean sale price, the average, $921,000.
No, mean is not average. Mean is middle.
Okay, mean as well. Okay, Bell, be that as it may, the prices are going up, but slowly. So it makes it, what would you say, Jim, a buyer's and seller's market. There are advantages to both sides.
Yeah.
Yes, the buyers can hold out if they can, and try and make the. And
Well,
the
I think
sellers
the
can hold
new
out.
tax laws are having some impact on the housing market, because if your deduction is only $10,000,
Doesn't
I
make
mean-
sense.
Yeah, that's all you can deduct. So, for example, I will give you just a quick anecdote. Someone who knows some people who live in a very wealthy section of the county. Their real estate taxes are in the $100,000 a year category. They're thinking of bailing out because all of a sudden, because of what the government has done, what the Trump administration has done with the deductibility of state and local taxes, limiting it to only $10,000, their adjusted gross income all of a sudden goes up by $90,000. If you're in a 33% tax bracket, that means you got to send the government about $30,000 in additional federal taxes, and probably another 10 grand in state taxes, all because of this deductibility thing that they threw at New York State, New Jersey.
This
Connecticut,
is
other high
going
tax
to be
states.
really a factor next spring.
Yeah. So that may be part of what we're seeing here, where the upper income people are just plain bailing out because of this tax deductibility scam.
Right. Now, Governor Cuomo has called for a new Roe v. Wade abortion law for New York, which Republicans have always refused to pass because it said you've got the national amendment on Roe v. Wade. But
that now
Governor
is in jeopardy, of
yes,
course, with
right.
Trump naming Brett Kavanaugh to be his nominee for the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh has a long track record of opposition to Roe v. Wade. He'd like to see it overturned, and also, coincidentally, he would like to pull Obamacare. They would like to do away with the requirement that pre-existing conditions be covered by insurance companies.
Well, that was the whole point of the Obamacare law in the first place, because insurance companies could cherry pick who they wanted to cover. An immoral practice, to say the least. Immoral. I repeat that word. Now, Trump abroad.
Congressional Republicans are in damage control today after Thursday's disastrous House hearing in which FBI agent Peter Strzok pulled the rug out from under Trumpsters, such as Congressman Trey Gowdy and Jim Jordan, who came across as a dedicated servant of the FBI, a true patriot, and someone who had no bias when he was working with dozens of others in the FBI and Justice Department to get the investigation going into Trump's ties with Russia and also criminality. Strzok had previously testified before this committee in a lengthy private session, so the congressman knew what he would say in yesterday's public session, and they also knew which questions FBI lawyers had instructed Strzok not to answer in order to protect the integrity of the Robert Mueller investigation of Trump. In an obvious, stupid, and unsuccessful attempt to trap Strzok, the Republicans, such as Gowdy and Jordan, kept asking him questions they knew he could not answer. And they then attacked him using the worst kind of bullying not seen on Capitol Hill since the dark days of disgraced Senator Joseph McCarthy's communist witch hunts. Democrats, such as Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York, kept on the attack against the outrageous behavior of the Republicans. What the Republicans were doing, trying to damage the Mueller investigation, the FBI, and the entire U.S. justice system while trying to protect Trump from justice. It was all painfully obvious. In fact, when it became so obvious that the Republicans were perpetrating a fraud against the American people, anyone watching could see what was going on. Fox News, which has become a propaganda outlet shilling for the Trump administration, cut away from its live coverage of the hearing because the truth was starting to come out.
Yes, unbelievable.
While British Prime Minister Theresa May was hosting Donald and Melania Trump as the guests of honor at a glamorous and lavish state dinner outside London last evening, a British newspaper, The Sun, was releasing an interview Trump had given to it shortly before in which he attacked May. Reports say this cast a pall over the evening as word spread among those in attendance. This morning, tens of thousands of Britons took to the streets to protest Trump's visit, and the famous baby Trump balloon, a 28-foot-high yellow gas bag with orange hair and a cartoon image of Trump's face wearing a white diaper, was launched. Trump's trip to the UK follows the NATO meeting in Brussels, where Trump did exactly what Russia's President Putin wanted, and attacked our longtime free world allies in an overt attempt to collapse the NATO alliance, which has kept Europe free of a Russian takeover since the end of World War II. However, what Trump did had just the opposite effect. It unified the allies, who pledged to stick together if the U.S. pulled out of NATO. And so Trump was forced to hold a news conference before leaving Brussels in which he backed off some of what he had been threatening for the 2 days of the NATO meeting.
Do. They always back off.
In meeting with the NATO allies, Trump told a string of outright lies, including his claim that he forced them to start spending more on NATO defense. Actually, they all had voluntarily agreed to raise their defense spending some years ago, and under the Obama administration began 4 years ago to actually start putting additional money into NATO.
I didn't know that.
You know, it's true.
Yeah.
We reported last week that Trump has hired the former co-president of Fox News, Bill Shine, who was ousted for covering up sexual assaults and other offenses by then-boss Roger Ailes, to be the Trump administration's communications honcho. Well, news broke this week that attempts were being made to wipe out a series of racist and white supremacist internet messages posted by Schein's wife. But at least some of those messages have been found and made public. Reaction from the White House? Silence. Trump still insists that when he meets with Russia's Vladimir Putin, it will be in private, with no record made of what they're saying to each other or promising to each other. Now that corrupt EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt has been forced out, will he be prosecuted for stealing from the American public? We hear that at least a dozen of the investigations into what he did while in office are continuing, even though he's out. Obscene performance charges against Stormy Daniels, the porn star Trump was fooling around with, were dropped by prosecutors in Columbus, Ohio. Police in Columbus staged a sting in which 3 officers on the Columbus police force touched Stormy Daniels.
Well, that would never happen in White Plains.
Her attorney, Michael Avenatti, charges the sting was politically motivated so they could arrest her.
Of course.
Trump thinks the airplanes used as Air Force One are not gaudy enough, and he wants them splashed in red, white, and blue paint. The current elegant paint scheme, designed by President John F. Kennedy and professional artists, commands attention and respect worldwide. And if you've never seen one of these airplanes in person, I guarantee you will be impressed when you do. John, you've seen it.
Yes,
We've seen
it swoops in like the spaceship Enterprise.
It is elegant the way it stands now.
Yeah.
Trump this morning again repeated the fiction that he has ended the nuclear threat from North Korea. Intelligence information and what Secretary of State Pompeo was told during his last visit to North Korea just a few days ago proves that North Korea is expanding, not dismantling, its nuclear program.
Inspections, 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 and right now we want to say that Anything Goes is going again. It opened at the Westchester Broadway Theater at press night last night, and those are just some of the great scenes you'll see. It's a hard-working cast, and this, of course, is, I think, Cole Porter's greatest show.
It's Cole Porter's musical. It's the tunes. It's the lyrics. It's the very, very clever dialogue. It's everything about it's the book. It's the lyrics. It's the music. It's a classic show.
Yes, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Gives you a good feel for it, great tap dancing, etc. And Jim Benerofe, you got a red light ticket, right?
I think I got a red light ticket.
Right.
Red light cameras strike again.
Yes, and that, of course, is the shocker of the week.
Well, but
So August 1st.
there's a grace period. There's a grace period.
August
So
1st.
Jim will not get the $50 fine, but he might get a warning in the mail.
Right, and we're getting the warning from the big clock on the wall that White Plains Week is over. John Daly, Peter Katz, Jim Benerofe. Good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week. News and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.